Everyone, my name is Sophia. I am a voice and guitar instructor at the Providence School of Music, but I'm also a composer. It's what I study at school, it's what I want to do with my life, it's what I love. So today I wanted to talk about the idea of taking a very small musical idea and turning it into a large piece. And this small musical idea is something called a motif. A motif just means, like I said, a small musical object or a series of notes that is used over and over again in different ways to create a whole giant musical piece. So today we're going to be looking at an example of using a small motif to turn it into a large piece, and then we're also going to be following along as I do some live composing on stream, which should be fun. So, hello, welcome if you're just joining in. So first, we're going to look at Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, because this is probably a perfect example of using a small musical theme to expand into a whole symphony, particularly the first movement. A lot of you might recognize this piece, and the motif we're going to be talking about is this, the classic bum 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 bum. So we're going to look at that first. Let's see, I want to make this so we can all see it. So I've circled the moments where this theme comes in. So the very beginning of the whole piece, the whole movement, the whole symphony is this, as I just played, bum 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 bum, bum 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 bum. And this is called, Beethoven calls it the Fate Motif, sort of imagined to be fate knocking at the door, saying, this is your life, this is your fate. So I've circled this opening. All of the instruments that are currently playing play this. And so what we're going to be looking at here is we have these 3/8 notes circled, and then it holds down on a half note. And this melody here, both of these are minor thirds. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. It just means that you get this minor sound. It's the beginning of a minor chord. So those notes, these are all minor thirds. And if we keep going in the piece, after we introduce that Fate motif, you'll see that each instrument begins to pick it up kind of on its own. Ooh, went too far there. So we have the violin 2 starting out, repeating that. And then we have the viola coming in with new notes, but the same interval, that same minor third. And then we have the violin all the way up high, and so on. So you can see I've underlined in red to echo the circle, underline in red all these moments where the motif shows up. So this is a really clear example of using these small notes, just 4 notes, those 3/8 notes, and then moving down a minor third. It comes back over and over and over again. And besides a few held notes in the cello and in the oboes, that's all that's happening. It's pretty fantastic. And as we move on, the texture gets a little more complicated, but we still have that's 3/8 notes moving down to a minor third. So you can see that the whole orchestra begins to move in. Ba 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 bum 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 ba 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 bum. It's really fun and super dramatic. And yeah, it's continuing. Everyone's picking it up. There's kind of this moment to really nail it in. You see this little symbol that looks like the dot with the curve over it. It's called a fermata. And what that means is that we hold it out as long as the conductor wants us to. So Beethoven is being super emphatic about this motif. We see it over and over and over again. It's appearing all the time. Even in moments where it's not exactly the same 3/8 notes on the same note moving down a minor third, we still see that rhythmic symbol all over the place, circling that in green. And it becomes the accompanying figure as well. So it's not just the main melody, but it happens underneath the moving melody. So you have all the low cellos and basses picking it up here, circled in green. They're moving up this time, but as you can see, it's everywhere. If you listen to it, which I think this is going to be shared in a YouTube video after this is done on the live stream, so I'll definitely link a great recording of this piece, probably the Leonard Bernstein version because he's my favorite conductor. I'll link a recording of this piece so you can, and the score, so you can follow along. So we just have this constant minor third motion going. Sometimes it comes in up here with just one step. That's in harmony here. What else have we got? Yeah, so I wanted to bring this out because as you can see, Beethoven is starting to shift the exact motif, so it's not just 3/8 notes in the same note, moving down a minor third. He's starting to shift it in little ways to keep the piece interesting, because we're already probably about 30 seconds in the piece. You don't want to be doing the exact same thing over and over again, or else we're just going to think, okay, this is just, you know, the pattern. This is all that's happening. Now it gets kind of boring. And, sorry, one moment. Lost something there. Cool, we're back. If the motif starts to slightly change, it keeps it interesting, and the audience is able to hold on to that idea and say, I recognize what this is. This sounds really nice to me. We like things that are familiar. But he's starting to slightly shift, which is a really great compositional tool when you're using motifs because it keeps the piece moving. And if he was just repeating da 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 over and over again with no note changes, no rhythm changes, no interval changes, interval meaning the relationship between the notes, so a minor third is an interval, then it gets boring. And as we'll see on the next page of the score, Beethoven uses that da 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 rhythm, but in a different relationship between the notes to introduce the second theme of the movement. So then we have this bum 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 bum. So it's evocative of the first motif, that, but instead of this minor third, we move down a lot larger interval. It's called a fifth, so it actually is kind of the outline of a major or minor chord. You can, or either way, moves down a fifth. And suddenly, even though it's really similar in a lot of ways to the first musical idea, it sounds totally different and feels totally different. Whereas before, the first motif, it was fate knocking at the door. It's very mysterious, kind of foreboding, perhaps even a little violent. Now we have this really triumphant melody. And we get this. So we're moving down kind of larger melodies, sometimes bigger steps can feel more grand or powerful. And that's exactly how Beethoven introduces the second section of the first movement. So you have all these little motions going everywhere. It's almost chaotic, even though he's a mastermind, so it's organized. But it feels like we don't know quite where we're going until we get this second theme. Ba-ba-ba-bum, bum, bum. And then now we're in a whole new world. So that's a really great example of how slightly changing the motif of that minor third can then lead us in to a whole new section, and he can change the motif really dramatically without it feeling totally unfamiliar. So that's my brief little analysis of the first couple pages of the score of Beethoven's Movement 1. And I'm just gonna pause here, see if we have any questions before we get into composing mode. Everything good? Cool. I'll give it 2 more seconds. You can write in the chat, or if you want, I think you can unmute yourself for a moment.
I just unmuted myself. This is Phil.
Oh, hello.
Hey, I just wanted to say I think this piece is a really great example of how much you can get out of a little bit, right? Um,
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the it's easy to come up with a good idea. It's really hard to develop it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So four notes, Beethoven made it work. It's pretty amazing, everyone. That's just my 2 cents. I'm going to mute myself
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah, the reason I chose that piece is because I think it's a really clear example of this idea of taking a small idea and making it big. It's super clear and it's amazingly well done. Beethoven is, uh, I mean, he's famous for a reason. He's an excellent, excellent composer in terms of the themes he uses. Oh, I think
Oh,
I'd.
we're back.
We're back? Okay,
We're
cool.
good. Yeah, we had a little technical difficulty there. We should be good now.
Cool. Yeah, even the Ode to Joy, the dun 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 is another really famous theme of Beethoven's that sort of in everyone's mind if you listen to classical music at all. So he's great.
Hi, everybody. I think we're frozen, so we're gonna quickly end the meeting and restart it. Let's see if, let's just try this 1 second. Oh,
Yes, I'm back, I think, but I want to make sure that we're good to keep moving. Okay, cool. Let's just keep going. Um, awesome. So now we're going to go into the fun part, which we're going to compose something in real time. And we're going to try our best to use this idea of taking a small idea and making it big and making it into a full piece. Obviously, we're not going to be working on the same scale as a giant symphony or with a full orchestra, but we're going to have a good time anyway. So, I'm a composer, as I mentioned, and I use this software called Sibelius. Sibelius is a really great software. It's made specifically for writing music onto sheet music. I will show you guys what it looks like in a moment. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah. So, this is Sibelius. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with it. You can write for any number of instruments. It's really useful too if you want to get better at reading music. I know that I wasn't super strong at reading bass clef before I started, but now that I write in this all the time, it's been a super useful tool for me, both to get better as a composer, but also as a musician, because I have to not only be able to hear and play music, but I have to be able to write it out, and it takes a lot of practice to become good at writing out what you're hearing or what I'm singing. And this Sibelius software is a super useful way to do that because it lets you move notes around on the page and all this great stuff. So I have been humming this melody to myself, and I'll play it in a second. And I thought, just because it's been on my mind, oh, hey, this is my cat. Okay, you can either stay down or move. All right, she'll sit on me. I've been using this motif, and I thought it would be fun to use because I've been humming it a lot, and I haven't composed for this before. I wanted to do it live just so you could kind of see what my process is in addition to thinking about motifs into larger things. Okay, you can go over there. So we're going to use that idea. So what I've been playing is this, it's almost like an expanded C major with a D in there, but the way it's voiced, I think is really pretty. I'll play it for you. Or I played that wrong. Yes, this kind of. I think it might sound nice sung by perhaps a tenor and a choir. Could also play it lower. I think it's just a nice melody. I've been humming and playing it to myself, so I thought we could use that. So if we're going to look at it thinking about this melody as a small musical idea that we can expand, first we have to see what's going on. So if I look at this, as I said, you don't have to know how to read music, but I want you to look at this visually. You can see that we have a large step here between the C and G, and then a smaller step, just one step, a whole step between the D and E. So now that I've hummed this and played this to myself a couple times, I go, okay, what about this can I make into something larger? What about this is something that would be recognizable if I slightly shifted it or put it in a different context? So I'm looking at this and I said, okay, we have a large interval, a large step, and then a small step right next to each other, and they're all going up in a row. And it's very lyrical. When I say lyrical, I mean smooth and nice. It's something that you could sing. So not only is it a small step and a large step, it's all going up. It goes up in pitch as we go throughout, like that. And another thing that I might notice about it is we have these 2 eighth notes, so 2 shorter, so ba-da, and then 2 quarter notes, da-da. So we have 2 eighth notes, 2 quarter notes, a large interval and a small interval, and it goes up. So that's a lot to work with. So say, okay, let's make something similar. So we'll use a large step and a small step to be kind of our melodic material here. So I'm gonna, whoop, did not mean to do that. I'm gonna mute this while I write in, just so it's not loud. So, all right, let's start with a large step. I'll just choose 2 random notes. Let's go, let's have a G and an E here. But I want to have it the rhythms. Ah, you guys are in the way of my little rhythm maker. Cool. So I said a G and an E, and maybe let's have, so that's our 2 eighth notes. Let's have the 2 quarter notes now. Maybe, how about we have D and E here, so let's do C and D. And I'm gonna do the same thing, or I put this symbol over. This symbol in blue here is called a slur, and it makes the player know that they have to play something super smooth. So not ba, 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 but da, 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 da. So let's do the same. Now let's hear what that sounds like next to each other. Okay, that's pretty nice. I think, so one thing that's nice about the first melody, in my opinion, and you guys can type in your opinion too if you want, I like that even though it spans a large range, we have this low C up to this high E, it feels pretty smooth, and I don't think the second melody feels as smooth. And I think that smoothness, that ability to sing something, that lyrical quality to it that I mentioned is something I want to keep. So I think I'm actually going to make this first interval a little larger so it can connect to the higher notes. So we'll move that up just one thing. All right, and then I think, and this is not necessarily a motivic motion, but this is something that I as a composer want to do. I want to make these lines feel connected so it can keep moving. As I said, I'm very into that lyrical sung quality of this. So let's keep that going. So I think I'm just going to put a note in between these to serve as kind of a transition point between these two melodic sections that are made up of our motive. So let's see what that sounds like. That's pretty nice. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Phil, can you hear the music fine from my computer?
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Yep, everything's good.
Cool. Cool. All right, so now we go, okay, what can we do with this? We have these two ideas that are based off of one melodic idea, the idea of a large step and then a shorter step. What can we do with these? Well, we can do kind of a very obvious move, and something that's really nice to do with software is that I can literally copy and paste something, because in the Beethoven, I was used all over the place in so many different instruments and ranges. When I say range, that means either very low or very high or in the middle. Range is sort of the height at which something is being played, I suppose, the vertical pitch. So, because I'm using a computer, I don't have to be Beethoven and write everything out with a quill and ink. I can just say, okay, I would like to use this melodic symbol. Let's move it over here, and then I'm going to do this thing that I can also do with software, which is just put it up one octave. So now it's going to be higher. So if we just listen to that, let's see, let's listen. I'm going to play that again. Something weird happened. So it's the same melody, but now it sounds really different because it's in a different range. And I think that sounds pretty nice. So we can use that. So if we listen to all of these things together, you'll hear that it sounds still familiar and the same. And we've kind of established this idea already, but now we're changing it up so we can add some interest. And the same thing that Beethoven did with his motif of saying, okay, I've already established it, so now I'm going to slightly change it just to keep it interesting and keep the piece moving forward. Let's listen. Cool. All right. I think because we're in the higher region, let's add some chords. So even though we're not going to be thinking about melody right now, we can still think about this idea of the large interval or the large space in between notes and the small. So I think what I'm going to do with the chords is go the same idea, but just right on top of each other. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with a large interval. I'm just going to kind of choose some notes. So we have this larger interval between D and A. That's what I'm feeling right now. And then we're going to have a smaller relationship, let's say between, nope, other one, G and E. So we have this large sound and then this smaller relationship. They're closer together. You can see that these notes are closer together. So even though we're not working in this melodic way, we can say, okay, I'm going to use what's special about the melody and put it in the chords. So we have a large step and then a small step. And I think we can do that again. Let's make it even larger this time. I want this to be a quarter note. Do I? We'll see. We'll find out. Let's make this an even larger melody. So we've got now a pretty large step. This is what's called a seventh between this low C and B. But what I've actually done here, I didn't even realize, but the first chord, you have this, this fifth, and then we have a third, which is the smaller interval, and then we have a seventh, which I actually use for the second version of the motif between this G and F. So we're kind of calling back to that. Sometimes cool things like that happen where you don't even realize, but you've created some unity throughout the piece because you're trying to work from this one motif. So often, sometimes even unintentionally, you can create these moments where the piece feels like one whole thing and it's super connected in these small little ways, like using a seventh for both second versions of the pattern. Cool. All right, what do I want this to be? Another small thing. Say, we can use another third here. So you can see that I follow this pattern of large, small, small for the chords underneath this idea. I think let's listen to that before we add some more melody up in the right hand and the higher melody. Let's check that out. Interesting. All right, so I think what I'm going to do here, and this is just my compositional instinct, but I'm going to move this higher melody 1 1/8 note over, just so it can still be an independent thing from the chords. So what I do here is I'll make a little eighth rest right there, and then I'll just copy and paste that in, and I'm going to make this. Delete that. So now I've just moved it over, and it'll still make some rhythmic sense. Let's listen to that and see what just a little shift can do to a piece. Ooh, turn the volume back on. Cool. So that kind of keeps it a little more interesting rather than just going totally along with the rhythm of the chords. So now what we can do is add this second idea that we've based off of this motif. I think I'm going to try the same thing that I did with the first one, where I just copy and paste it and then bump it up an octave. Let's see what that does. Okay, so that's pretty low. So I'm just going to play from the middle of the piece so we can hear what that sounds like. This might run into the chords. If you notice, we have this sort of low note and then a higher note in the bass clef, so they might clash a little bit, but it might be interesting. Let's see. Okay, I was right in that this kind of runs into the chords. So what happens, and this is kind of what we can do with these motifs, if we can do very, very simple motions to keep the piece interesting, especially only a couple bars in. Okay, you're gonna step on the keyboard and you're gonna ruin my music. So let's take this idea, make it super high. Let's see what that sounds like. A lot of this is just trial and error, and a big thing with composing is that sometimes people think, you know, melodies just pop into your head when you're walking down the street. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes you just get a tune stuck in your head. But more often than not, for me at least, it's having one very simple idea and then trying out a bunch of different things and seeing what I like best. And then kind of my musical instinct, perhaps the composer instinct, that I think is in everyone, actually. I think anyone can be a composer, is just knowing when you personally enjoy something musically. So let's see what this sounds like. I think I'm actually going to stretch out these chords. They move a little too fast for my liking. So I'm going to make this longer. And we're going to add that, or make that longer too. Just because I feel like it. That's my way of composing. I just build things. All right, let's listen to this whole thing. So that's pretty dramatic. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I think it might be a little too dramatic for so early in the piece, especially since it's been pretty calm so far. So what we can do with these motifs is that if it's not 100% to our liking, we can change it around a little bit. So rather than just take this whole thing down the octave again, make it lower, because that wasn't super interesting, I'm just going to take half of it, the higher half, and make it lower so it fits a little bit better into our into the energy of the piece, because right then it got a little too high, I think. So we're just going to take the second half, this little step, the whole step, the smaller step of our motif, and we'll bring it down. And I'm going to add another chord. So we've done a small interval here. So now we're going to do a larger one again. Let's see. How about, I'll make this lower. Nope, too low. How about that? Yeah. Cool. So let's see what this idea, so what I've done as a little review, I've taken these two motifs from the beginning, these first two bars, that nice melody of large step, small step, and I've taken them and I've made them higher. But our second one got a little too high for so early on in the piece. So I took half of it and I just shifted the motif just a little bit to fit the compositional function. And what's important to note here is that, you know, sometimes as composers, we want to follow the rules. We want to copy things exactly so it makes kind of intellectual sense. But what's really important is that we follow our emotional musical sense as well. So even though I've sort of disrupted the motif by bringing half of it down the octave, I think, and we'll see, I think it'll fit the piece better because I didn't want to go that high yet. So we're not there yet. So let's listen to the whole thing and see what happens. Yeah, so now it feels like a melody, and even though things are different, it still feels really familiar, and I think that's really nice. I think that works quite well. Yes. I can't actually see the chat function while I'm doing this, so you can unmute if you have any questions or anything. So, what else? So now we have this, and now we can move forward. So this is kind of, you can think about this as our opening statement. Often the first 4 bars of a piece, or first 2, sort of a little chunk of music can establish what the rest of the music is going to feel like. So let's keep going. What else can we do with this motif, this idea of large interval, small interval, moving up? What else can we do with that? We can do a lot. So we've already moved it up. What happens if we make it really low? That might be a little dramatic, but let's find out. So I'm just going to take these 2 ideas and make them even lower. So now it's super low. Let's listen to that. Ooh. Especially in that second motif, that's really low. So I think we're going to do the same thing that we did with the higher ones. I'm just going to bring that one note up. Let's see what that sounds like. All right, that's fine. We'll come back to that. So since we've had this melody a lot, this C, G, D, E, it's come back 3 times now, I think I'm going to slightly shift this. So what I'm actually going to do is this is another kind of lazy software trick. I'm just going to move it up 2 notes. So this means that the melody will be a little different because we have different notes, but it'll be the same kind of idea or shape and what's called a contour, just the shape of a melody. You can think about that. Let's see what that sounds like. Oh, I guess I'll move the other one up too. All right, so by doing that, I've made it feel really different because we have that very weird sounding interval. So I think instead of moving it up more, because I like the other notes, I'm just going to adjust this. Yeah, and then I'm going to move that one too. That also sounds a little dark. So we'll move that down. Let's see what that sounds like. I'm gonna move this one down so we can get that whole step feeling, because I think that's a really key motion. I've realized that's become very important, specifically that the small interval of this melody is a whole step. I really like that. So now that we have established kind of a nicer sounding bass, because even though we can just move the melody around, it caused kind of a weird sounding feeling. So I want to keep the piece feeling very beautiful, because so far it's been very lyrical and nice, and we don't want to totally shift the mood so quickly. So let's listen to that one more time, and then we can put some high things on top of that. Cool. So this is, I think, the last thing we're going to do. But we're just going to add a little bit more of a high melody on top of this, and then we can say that's our first 6 bars of a piece that we wrote. So I think it would be nice to have sort of a mix of melody and chords on top, because if we have melody and melody in both the right and left hand, it can get kind of overwhelming. So let's start with some chords. I think I'm going to let this be for a moment, so we won't have it come in until the 3rd beat. But let's see, what nice interval can we do here? So we have this G, so let's have, yeah. This kind of minor sound. I'm going to follow the idea again of large to small. So I think with this, because it's our large interval here is not that large, I can go even smaller on the small interval. Let's see. Move U so I can do this. So now we have the notes right next to each other. So that might sound a little strange because they're going to clash. But it also could sound nice in the context of everything else that's going on. And now we're going to open up the melody a lot. Oh, and I said we would do some mix of melody and chords. So we have this chord, but it's going to move into the melody. And I want to follow that same idea of the large step and then the smaller one. Let's make that. And since we're up here, all right, let's listen to the whole thing. And what I want you to think about is think about all the different ways we've used this first motif, and the ways we've transformed it, moved it around, and shifted it when necessary to fulfill the nice musical needs. So we'll listen to it, and then I think we'll take a minute for questions or thoughts or anything else, and then we'll call it a day. All right, let's listen to it together with my cat. This is Petra. Say hello. All right. So I think that works nicely. Even though I said this relationship between the D and E might be weird, I think in the context and how high it is, it sounds nice. Just a fun last tip is that sometimes notes that are really close to each other can sound nice very high up, but not so nice lower. Just just because of the way the frequencies work. It can get a little muddy, but up high, those same notes can sound really nice together. All right. Yes, that's all piece. I'll name this if I can. Let's name it. Sophia and Friends live stream piece. Hooray. Thank you for joining me on this compositional journey. Now I will stop sharing Sibelius. All right. If we have any thoughts or questions to wrap it up, let me know.
Hi, everyone. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute your mic and ask it. I'm going to chime in with another couple cents. I think it's really great to watch the editing process in real time, because I think we have this idea like composers just have an idea, it comes in their head, and then it's done. We just write it out. It's all in our ear and in our head. But really, composing is work, and it's editing work. Editing in real time. Like, you think of an idea, you edit it. You change it, you develop it, but that's not right, so you change a couple more things with what you just added. So it's constant editing, which is really fun. But yeah, anybody feel free to chime in.